I'm really thrilled today to have Bob Moore with us. So Bob, if you wouldn't mind, rather than me go into your intro and who you are and like what Crossbeam is, what you guys are doing, why don't you go ahead and just kick it off for us? Like say hello, tell us who you are, tell us about Crossbeam, anything that you think is noteworthy, and then we'll take it step by step here and go from like the get to know you to the like fun get to know you better conversation. So jump on in, let us know who you are, what you do, and anything you want to share.
Cool. Yeah, I'll try to give you the 2 minute flyby on me. Thank you to everybody who showed up. Great to see some familiar names in the crowd. I've been looking forward to this one. If nothing else, an excuse to catch up with Patrick is always a big win in my book. Yeah, name's Bob Moore. I'm the CEO and co-founder over at a company called Crossbeam. Crossbeam, you can think of almost like an escrow service for data. So when two companies partner with each other, they very often have questions like, how many customers do we have in common and who are they? Or, are my sales reps currently trying to sell to any of the same people or companies that your sales reps are trying to sell to? Math is working against you when you try to answer those questions. You can't draw a Venn diagram between my data and your data unless I give you all of my data or you give me all of yours. And that's kind of a non-starter for a bunch of really good security and privacy related reasons. So Crossbeam solves that data standoff issue by kind of being this secure, independent third party that sits in between companies who partner with each other and provides an environment where they can connect their data and then specify extremely nuanced rules about who can see what, when, and under what circumstances. And it basically unlocks this entirely new, we call it like an ecosystem data layer, which is kind of like the knowledge that everyone in your partner ecosystem has about the accounts and people that you are trying to work with as a business. So we started the company about 5 years ago. There are 16,000 businesses using it now, including I think it's now over 85, it might be over 90% of the Bessemer Emerging Cloud Index. So like a ton of publicly traded companies, almost everybody who's kind of IPO'd in the last 5 years or so of like the emerging, at least software and technology stack are on the Crossbeam platform, along with a big long tail of, agency partners, system integrators, small software companies, things like that. I can talk a lot about that business. It's very unusual and unique in a lot of ways because it's kind of like a network effects company. But prior to this, if you're from the Philly area, you may be familiar with some of the other companies I've co-founded over the years. One was called RJ Metrics, which was a data analytics platform for e-commerce companies. Co-founded that with Jake Stein in 2008. We sold it to Magento in 2016. And then Jake and I co-founded another business called Stitch Data in 2016 that we sold to Talend in 2018. Both of those were much nerdier than Crossbeam, if you can believe it, kind of more in like the data analytics, data infrastructure side of the house. So I've been doing data related software stuff for now over 15 years professionally, and Crossbeam's the latest hot new thing here.
Thank you for that. And I think there's a lot of interesting things about Crossbeam that I actually want to make sure we touch on as part of this call, because I have questions personally. I mean, a year or so ago, I came across like a head of partnerships profile on LinkedIn that I was having a call with, and they already had Crossbeam as like a skill set listed on their profile.
Yeah.
And I absolutely was like blown away. I'm like, this Crossbeam's been out for a few years at this point. Like people are already listing it as a skill set on their profile. So like really impressive. And I think from seeing the stuff that you had built in the past, I mean, starting with RJ, but then Stitch as well, like it seems like you've moved more into what I'll call like the pure SaaS model, where you've got a lot of the kind of key components of what makes a great SaaS business, and that you've learned that and built that into the DNA of Crossbeam, which is impressive. And I think speaks to like maybe even to a degree, like the amount of money that you've raised and been able to raise for it, that like you guys have been able to show, I think even early on, like a huge hockey stick type of growth and potential. I mean, I think you raised over $100 million. I don't know if that makes you a unicorn, a baby unicorn, or just like a really fast racehorse. So like, I'd love to understand a little bit more, I think, about Crossbeam, but can we just back up a step and like, what was the opportunity? I know you covered it in terms of like the math is against you if you really want to capture partner data, but like, how did you come up with the idea for Crossbeam, and what was staring you in the face that you were like, this is the best idea I have, right? I'm sure Bob Moore's got a list of 100 ideas and things he could pursue, but what made this top of the list, and why are you pursuing it, and how big, also just like how big do you think this can go? Like, is this the next Salesforce, or like is it going to be what's the potential here?
Yeah, great. So I'll start with like where this idea came from, and hopefully touch on all those points for you. So if you rewind the clock back to RJ Metrics, we that business was one that sold to a really specific audience, which was online retailers. So, if you had an online store selling something, you were a prospect for us. And when we got toward the end of the life cycle of that business and it became clear that we were going to get acquired, we found ourselves in this situation where we had 2 or 3 companies, all of whom were interested in potentially acquiring us. They wanted to, conduct some preliminary due diligence and get to know the company better, in order for them to figure out what they'd be willing to pay to buy the company. And as you can imagine, the 2 or 3 businesses that wanted to do this were all companies that hated each other. Like it was a bunch of like the 3 big players in the e-commerce technology universe that are kind of like the main shopping cart platforms. So on almost the same exact day, all of them that we were talking to sent us a request, and they said, please send us your entire customer list, including how much each customer is paying. And sure, we're under NDA, but there's something slightly terrifying about A, having that information out there, but B, giving that information to 3 people, knowing for sure that one of them is going to buy us and the other 2 are going to be super pissed off that one bought us and probably acquire one of our competitors instead, right? And be going after the same market in the same way. And by the way, having their hands on not just our customer list, but how much money those customers were paying us. So we had some trepidation around this, and we went back to those companies and kind of asked, like, why do you need that? Like, what are you getting at by getting at this data, other than just like, we can tell you our total revenue, we can tell you how many customers we have. Why do you need to know the who? And they said, oh, well, we want to run this analysis on what overlaps. We want to see how many of your customers are actually already customers of ours, where there's like kind of this immediate serviceable, obtainable market that exists at the intersection of our customer bases that just hasn't been realized. And that'll really help us understand, like, when someone buys our product, are they paying twice as much to you just to get the analytics, or are they paying a fraction of what they pay us to you, right? All these things that allow them to more intimately kind of model the implications about what it would mean to have us bolted on to their offering, what they could charge for it, how big the market is, et cetera. Like, a really valid answer. But the reality is, like, like I kind of said in the intro, right? When you're trying to do this Venn diagram style analysis, math is working against you. Like, you literally, in set theory, right, you cannot draw a Venn diagram and know what's in the middle unless you have all of the data from both of the sets. So they were just asking a very rational thing, which was, we need your whole data set in order to find this little sliver of overlap that exists. And I looked far and wide and really kind of pounded the pavement. And the closest thing that I could find to a solution to this problem was, you could pay like McKinsey or one of these consulting firms like a couple $100,000 and send them a bunch of spreadsheets, and they would, like, do a VLOOKUP for you and send the answers over along with their bill. And that kind of blew my mind. And in that particular moment, we found a very creative solution to the problem, which was not creative at all. We just gave everybody all of our data, and it was absolutely terrifying. And we relied on the NDAs, and we sold the thing and whatever. But so then we get acquired by Magento, and I go in-house at Magento. And Magento is a much bigger company than RJ Metrics was. They had just spun out of eBay. They would end up getting acquired by Adobe for $1.6 billion in 2018, and RJ Metrics would like go along with it. RJ is technically part of Adobe now. While I was in-house at Magento for 2 years there as part of the deal, and they had a technology partner ecosystem of over 500 companies that had built like plugins or add-ons or apps that could run alongside or integrated with Magento. They also globally had over 10,000 agency partners and system integrator partners that were basically all of these web design shops and agencies that built Magento websites for retailers. And this was their partner ecosystem. You know, it's an enormous universe of folks. And I was on the growth and strategy team there. So both of those teams were kind of part of my segment of that group. And day in and day out, I saw this same exact prisoner's dilemma problem show up. Like trying to collaborate with these 500 technology partners. Which accounts should we be going after together? How does this sales rep know what overlaps with that sales rep's accounts at this other company? Can we get them to send us all their customers? Are we willing to send them customers? What it all amounts to is, in the absence of something like Crossbeam, this process that people call account mapping, which is basically comparing my list to your list, becomes this like very shady, dark art of people emailing spreadsheets to each other under the radar and just being extremely inefficient about everything you do downstream from there. The data gets out of date right away. The matching is done very, very sloppily and incompletely. You end up oversharing to get less than what you were hoping to get out the other side. It's impossible to measure. When the security and privacy and legal teams find out about it, their heads explode and you have problems. But it is this globally accepted common business practice that exists at like any company of any scale. And it's kind of like how work gets done as like this kind of shadow playbook that exists inside of you know, any mature company. So the idea for Crossbeam really emerged when at Stitch, we got to witness everything going on in the modern data stack around cloud data warehousing, modern data pipelines, the modern API economy. What that all amounts to is like, it's easier than ever to move data, and that data is more structured than ever. And that gives you the opportunity to build new kinds of technology and platforms on the backs of like this constant stream of data coming out of all these reliable systems of record. And that whole escrow service for data concept would have been physically impossible even like 5 or 6 years ago. Like APIs were not as mature and reliable as they are today. The systems that you can spin up in the middle to consume and process that data were not as cost efficient and globally deployable as they are and trusted as they are today. And frankly, the concerns about the security and privacy that we solve weren't as prevalent in the like pre-GDPR CCPA era where they've become a really big deal now. So like it was this confluence of why nows that made, like, when you talk about product market fit, the market side was this massive opportunity of this issue that exists in basically every B2B company on the planet. And then the product side of product market fit was, there's technology out there that will let us fix this that didn't even exist 5 years ago. And if we don't build it right now, somebody's going to in the immediate term. So like that's the origin of Crossbeam. Was we sold Stitch, or we were in the process of selling Stitch. And you mentioned like I probably have like a list of all these startup ideas somewhere. You're right. Most of them are terrible, but I keep at the time it was an Evernote file. Now it's in Notion. And it's like every time I come across some gap in the market or some like interesting problem that I start geeking out about, but I don't have the time or focus to do it, I throw it into this file. And in early 2019, I guess it was, maybe this was actually early 2018, we were like in the process of starting to think about selling Stitch. I remember talking to Jake Stein, my old co-founder, about the list and about what was on it, because I was thinking about what was next. And this idea, which was called Shared Secrets at the time, before the Crossbeam name came along, just kept bubbling up to the top, because it felt like, of all the ideas that existed, it felt like it had the best why now, and it had the biggest implications if it could be successful, but was probably also the most volatile, right? Like if it didn't work, it was gonna, oh, here's your, I hope everybody's cell phone is, this is a test. Way to go, everybody. We did it. But anyway, I couldn't shake this idea. So yeah, after we sold Stitch, I probably should have gone and like, sat on a beach or like had, 5 years of therapy or something. But instead I felt like it's kind of Crossbeam or Shared Secrets was like kind of having a now or never moment. And it just felt so, it was just, it lit up my brain, right? And I think the FOMO of not pursuing it would have outweighed the relaxation of sitting on a beach somewhere.
I love that. So I have two thoughts on that. One, maybe we could cross beam our startup ideas after this,
Yeah.
and see where there may be some overlap there. Just kidding. I know we're not there yet, but that I love that it's the shared secrets piece, and that makes tons of sense. The other thing I was curious about is like, I'm guessing you have just tons and tons of integrations, but is Crossbeam, this is like a simple question. I just want to know, because for the folks that are clients and for other folks that are going to watch this,
Yeah.
even myself, like, is this for anybody? Like if I'm somebody with 50 customers
Yeah.
and I've got partners that have 50 customers, like can I connect my pipe drive? They can connect their Salesforce and we can see where that, can we do that together? Is that a use case, or is this like I need to have 5,000 customers and all this other sophistication for this to make sense for my company?
This is the beauty of the ecosystem led growth, like as a motion. And we call everything that you do with that data layer that we unlock, we kind of put under this umbrella of ecosystem led growth, right? It's like using companies outside your own walls to kind of win together through these various playbooks, and using data as like that common language through which you define what to do, and you scale those things. So the beauty of ecosystem led growth is, if you have 50 customers, that is great. It scales. And when you say something scales, everybody always assumes that means it scales up, but it also scales down really, really well. And part of the evolution of becoming an ecosystem-led company is that you can, at a very, very early phase, have like a pretty fundamental understanding as to whether or not there's anything about your business model or your value proposition that becomes stronger or better when your customers are also either using someone else's product or using someone else's service or having some kind of experience out there in the world that you don't have control over. And in today's economy, any business that's been founded in the last decade plus, that's almost intrinsically true for. And that doesn't mean you need to have a big, complicated technology integration you invested a lot of money in. It really just means that your offering becomes more powerful when stuff outside of your control is also true, right? So if you build HR related technology, it's probably going to work better if people are using a really good applicant tracking system instead of a bunch of spreadsheets. Even if you don't have an integration into the applicant tracking system, right? It's like the fact that you are part of a fabric or like a stack of solutions that define how people do their jobs or their work makes for an argument that you want to win together, you can target markets together, you can tell a unified story, you can go to market together with the other companies out there that are kind of basically everybody but your direct competitors out there in the fabric of the technology landscape. So what we end up seeing is, whereas in the early days, these ELG playbooks and crossbeam adoption, you almost had to have a big established ecosystem to start. It's actually come full circle now where people use Crossbeam to figure out who ought to be in their ecosystem in the first place, and like vet this universe of companies before they build the integrations, before they run the co-marketing campaigns. This is a way to basically preview and understand what's that addressable market that we share, and also do the analysis of like, what's the difference between when someone uses both of our things instead of just using one of them, right? And running the analytics on like, oh, look at that, our contract values are higher, deals close faster, et cetera. You can kind of plot all the potential partners on that scatter plot and pick the ones you want to work with. So yeah, at 50 people, great. The other thing I'll say about Crossbeam is we have a free tier of the product. So there's 16,000 companies on Crossbeam today. Obviously, they don't all pay us money. There is a long tail on there, and there's plenty of folks out there with 50 customers. Sign up for free, and if you've got 3 users or less and only need to do basic account mapping, you don't have to pay anything for it. And it's really only when you start to operationalize it, use our deeper integrations, et cetera, that you start to move into our paid tiers.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was always curious about that. I think I signed up for a trial when you guys launched, and at the time I think I don't know if we had very many customers or anything. I just sort of I bounced. I didn't move further. And so as I've been watching your growth, it's popped up on my mind a few times. And I think for a lot of our clients, like they're in that smaller tiers. So I think that is good to know. While we're just on the topic of Crossbeam, and then I'll take it elsewhere. I'd love to know like a little bit around how big is the opportunity that you think you have? And I know like raising money is something that you're good at. So I know you've got a background in venture capital and that like telling a compelling story, and it sounds like you've got a great compelling story with Crossbeam as it is. So I don't think it's not something that it's probably not hard for you to meet with investors and paint a compelling picture, but to raise like 100, it's like you've raised $100 million or something.
Yeah.
So to do that, the story's got to be pretty good, but I'm guessing that the opportunity and what you think you're capable of doing with this business is also pretty massive. So can you speak a little bit about like what trajectory do you really think you're on? And I mean, that amount of money is one that like you could be acquiring customers, you may be placing investments in partners. I mean, what you could be doing a whole lot of things there behind the scenes that like I don't know about at least. So I guess I'm just curious to learn like what scale do you feel like you're kind of at
Mhm.
with what you're operating at right now, and like what scale do you think you're going to? Like, are you going to go public? Are you a unicorn? Like what, just talk a little bit about like where are you going with this thing? What's the end goal or the vision that you think you're gonna get out of this?
Yeah, it's funny because when Jake and I started RJ Metrics in 2008, we quit our jobs. We worked at a venture capital firm called Insight Partners in New York. And we quit our jobs on a Friday in September 2008, and on Saturday Lehman Brothers collapsed. And we spent from 2008 until 2012 completely bootstrapping RJ Metrics. Didn't raise a dollar of outside capital. Ran the like classic Eric Ries like lean startup build measure learn playbook. Got to our first $1 million in revenue and dozen or so employees, a couple hundred customers, all, basically by eating ramen noodles and, operating out of a small office in Camden, New Jersey until the economics started to work. And then the market started waking back up and we had an interesting business on our hands, and we ended up raising a bunch of venture capital dollars that accelerated the growth. And simultaneously, I think, made the business bigger than it would have otherwise been, but also forced us into a situation where we kind of like had to exit because there was just a difference in the gear. We had shifted into a different operational gear as a business that kind of put us in a zone where we like had to either perpetually raise money or hinder our ambitions. And we got to a moment in time when someone offered us more than we thought it was worth. And that's always when people ask me the question, like, are you going to IPO? Do you want to sell the company? Do you want to run this thing forever? My answer has always been internal, external, whatever. I will sell this company the minute someone offers me more than I think it's worth. And that's a little bit of like a brain teaser, right? Because as CEO and founder, part of my job is to be like the biggest cheerleader and eternal optimist about the business that exists on the planet. And also I have information that no one else has, right? I'm the ultimate inside trader of our own company's stock because I know everything about the business. And anybody out there that is kind of willing to, put a valuation on the company or clock its value somewhere, will probably know a bit less than me. And the hope ought to be that my vision for what it can become always outstrips what their vision for what it can become ultimately is. Otherwise, I'd be, selling stock just out of sheer obligation to maximize value for shareholders, right? And drive that price up irrationally and create liquidity. So like, all that said, then you get into the flip side where like, there are really only two situations in which you would sell. One of which is someone offers you a ridiculous price that kind of extends and affords you value that goes beyond your own vision for what this thing could become. So just like an extreme premium purchase. Or B, your own vision of what this thing can become kind of sours and you start to feel like you see a bit of a ceiling, and maybe it actually is more valuable to someone else than it is to you, right? It's more valuable inside of another thing than it is as a standalone company. And I've had one of each of those experiences. At RJ Metrics, we were like a rocket ship grower where our market suddenly got very competitive, and there were some pretty profound like shifts in the competitive landscape and how people bought and consumed products in our space that caused our business to kind of flatten out from a growth perspective. And Jake and I looked at all the options and like really did not think that it would be wise to continue growing this company in a venture-backed fashion. And we thought that to drive it to profitability and keep it interesting for everybody involved with it would require such a drastic pivot that it actually was better to sell it and make it home to someone else. And that was the Magento deal. Ultimately was like kind of category 2, right? It was like we had a bit of a ceiling on where we thought this thing could go, and we saw an opportunity to give it a really good home at what we thought was a fair price, and we did that deal. At Stitch, we'd only been running the company for 2 years, and a big publicly traded company in the space came and just offered us a premium, cash price for this 19-month-old company that just we felt like afforded us so much forward credit for what the company would become that it was a rational thing for us to do that deal. By raising a bunch of money for Crossbeam, you create a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that it's kind of like it's a little bit of an all or nothing game, right? And I don't think this is something I would have done in an earlier company or in a different phase of my life. But the reality is that Crossbeam, by definition, is one of those companies that's either going to be very big or it is going to go down in flames. And I will say, as any startup founder should say, the verdict is still out, right? Despite, we put some points up on the board here and there, but this is a network effects business, right? Like this is like LinkedIn for data. So this is not, you can just add another incremental customer by being really good at selling stuff or by building some real specific value proposition that works really well for a narrow segment of customers. This thing only works if everybody uses it. Like it is inherent to the thing itself that there is no single player mode. And if your partners are not also on the platform, then it is not valuable to you. But once you and all of your partners are on the platform, there is this really compelling like ecosystem level lock-in where we become the exclusive place where you can get access to this, specific layer of data. So then the question becomes twofold in terms of how big this gets. One is, can you actually climb that mountain and build that network graph and overcome the cold start problem within the network effects? And that's really been the North Star of our business throughout most of our history. And I can talk about that journey, which is not easy. But then there's like Act 2, which is, okay, if you feel like you've actually won that battle and you have then that network graph captive, what can you build on top of this proprietary data layer that you are the only source through which people can get at it? And that is where you start to talk about not just, hey, let's build a SaaS product for partnership teams to do better work. That's when you start to talk about this is a platform play. And you can actually build an entire economy of interconnected applications that are built on top of and or are made better by this extremely proprietary, extremely valuable data layer that all originates from the Crossbeam platform. And that's big, right? Like you're talking about, you think about Salesforce and its market cap, right, as a CRM platform that ostensibly is in the business of delivering these siloed CRM instances to an enormous universe of players. Our addressable market is everybody that uses or could use Salesforce plus Microsoft Dynamics plus HubSpot plus Pipedrive plus whatever the long tail plus Google Sheets, right? Anybody that's got customers. And what we offer is not an opportunity to stamp out siloed instances of a place to understand your customers and your sales pipeline, but instead a interconnected graph of all of those instances, like a hyper CRM that not only contains your knowledge of the companies that you are selling to, but provides you a portal through which you can actually see into the selected pieces of all of your partners' knowledge as well, all while allowing everybody to retain kind of control and ownership over the knowledge that's proprietary to them. That is big. And I think that in the scope of pursuing that vision, raising $100 million, in some ways kind of should feel like a drop in the bucket. Burning $100 million, you got to earn it, right? Earn it to burn it. There's a whole other topic here, right? Which is like zero interest rate phenomenon stuff, what went on in the markets in 2020 and 2021. As an operator, I consider myself like a steward of capital and capital allocator. And there was an opportunity to extremely economically efficiently and very minimally dilutively acquire a large stockpile of cash that we are choosing to deploy over a very long-term time horizon rather than like light up into flames, over a 2 to 3 year period after raising it. And in doing so allows us to go after like the bigness of this vision in a much more thoughtful, deliberate, long-term way. Instead of, getting on the gravy train of 2021 and then needing to raise money again in 2022, right? Like this, we have spent, significantly less than half of the money that we have ever raised in the course of this business. And that's always been true across all our rounds.
So I love a lot of what you just shared, and one of the things I love about it is, man, you are so, I'm gonna drop an F-bomb. You're so fucking smart, dude. Like, I just the expertise you have in your own domain, plus in this space, is clear. It's clear, right? It's obvious what you bring to the table. And I wanna just understand from you is I'm not gonna challenge you to go like as succinctly as you can put it, but I'm betting there's some fundamental lessons that you have or things that you learned either in high school or in college when you were building your first widget or your first venture,
Yeah.
your first thing, or somewhere along the way. Like, I know, I took a theater class in college that I learned fundamental stuff that still to this day like carries me as a operator, as a business operator, as a human being. And so I'd love to just know, like, getting to like the basic building blocks, like some of the things that you learn that you feel like are those building blocks that carry you forward, that let you get to this level of sophistication in terms of being able to say things like, I'm a steward of capital and allocating capital, and these things, like, they really
Yeah.
wise. You got some real wisdom in there that I think is what not just investors like to hear, but that's carrying you into the right arena, or carrying you into these arenas in a fashion that's gonna, I think, bode well for your success and your chances of success. So if you can back up to like Bob Moore before college, in college, at RJ Metrics, like any of those early stages where there was a couple things that you learned that were like the oh shit moments, where that you realized, wow, that's what it takes to build a business, or that's what it takes to be able to put these pieces together. Like, what were some of the things that, if they come to mind to you, that like really are those foundational blocks that got you from, I'll call it, level one entrepreneur to level two to level three? And if you can point to a couple of those, I think that would be really interesting. I'd be certainly curious to know what some of those are. And then if you can attribute them to, I don't know, a person or a story or anything, that would be cool. But yeah, I would just love to know where did this come from? Like, was your dad an entrepreneur, and and when you were in high school, he, paid you $5 for cutting the grass, but 10 if you actually like didn't cut corners or something? Like, what was the thing that got you to that first level or second level, or what were a couple of the lessons that you could point to that you think have been key to getting to this place?
Wow. Yeah, let me ramble a little
Or
bit.
were you born like this?
It's a great question.
Were you reading at a college level in kindergarten, or what do you
Yeah,
where did this
so
come from?
first of all, I'll say none of that stuff, right? Like I will give a huge shout out to my parents who valued academics a ton and invested in me tremendously. But they weren't entrepreneurs. My dad was in school PR, and my mom was a bookkeeper for a small local business. I wasn't like solving quadratic equations at age 5. I went to a public high school in a very small town in southern New Jersey called Glassboro. There were 150 kids in my graduating class. However, I do think I was like always surrounded by people who were willing to let me go and experiment and kind of see how far I could take things, and like encourage me to find creative paths to, just learning. I can think of a few examples of that. Like in my high school didn't have any computer science classes at all. Didn't like the you could take typing 1 or typing 2. That was all the classes that were available. So like in high school, I graduated high school in 2002. So like I kind of came of age during the original .com boom. So like 1999, I'm in 9th grade, 2000, I'm in 10th grade. And I don't know what it was. And maybe I owe credit to my dad and even my my grandpa Jimmy, who had an Apple IIe computer right outside of his bathroom at his house in Morristown, New Jersey, and I got hooked on playing Oregon Trail. Something made me like really obsessed with computers, and when I had kind of like gotten done with the typing classes in my high school, I went to the computer teacher and they let me do like an independent study, which is like there's like no such thing as that in my high. There's not like a way to do that. I don't even think I got credit for it. They just whatever. They just let me, instead of study hall, like start learning how to do stuff with computers that was beyond the typing. And at that point in time, that meant GeoCities websites and Flash animations, right? So I started making Flash games. And this is like the first thing I ever did that taught me how to program was I made a parody game of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out called Steve Deutschbauer's Punch-Out. Steve Deutschbauer was our history teacher. And it was just like a boxing game where like you were boxing against the teachers, and I got the teachers to like take photos, and it's like, you know, take a photo like you just punched me, take a photo like you just got punched. And it is all, you can probably find it on Newgrounds still. It's probably out there somewhere. But it's this fun, like, you know, very choppy South Park style animation. But had to learn how to do if statements, how to learn, you know, how to create keyframes and lightweight animations. And like that snowballed into, people knew that I could build stuff on the computer, and I started getting opportunities to build websites commercially. So those of you from Philly might know the cheesesteak shop Tony Luke's. Tony Luke's son, Tony Luke Jr.'s son, Mike, was in my grade in high school, and as my best friend to this day. And through Mike, I was able to get the job of being the webmaster for TonyLukes.com, the Tony Luke's website, from like 1998 until, I don't know, 2006. So like, you know, I ran the website for the local cheesesteak shop and for the local auto mechanic. The husband of my high school biology teacher had an auto mechanic shop that hired me to do their website. And I built this like web design business that had a pretty big client roster by the time I was applying to colleges. And I applied just to like engineering and business programs, and I got into Princeton, which is like unfreaking heard of, and like beyond any expectations that I think I had of myself or folks around the table had of me. But I think it was because of the entrepreneurship stuff, and because I was like, you know, I wasn't number one in my class. I had, you know, perfectly good SAT scores, but compared to people going to Princeton, like, you know, middle of the pack at best. But I had this business that I had built doing web design, and it all just like, it all parlayed into the next thing, right? So I get to Princeton, I'm studying statistics and computer science and economics all at the same time. And in this moment, so now we're in like 03, 04. If you remember, the poker became really, really big. So like the World Series of Poker was on like ESPN all day, every day. This guy, Chris Moneymaker, which was his real name, like won the World Series of Poker and became like this micro celebrity. The movie Rounders with Edward Norton and Matt Damon came out like all at the same time. Everybody on the planet was playing Texas Hold'em. And for a class project, I wrote a piece of software called the Moraculator. And it was a calculator that told you your odds of winning a given poker hand in Texas Hold'em, right? You just put in what your cards are, and it's like, just like they would have on the TV, like heads up display when they were showing the World Series on TV, you could do it at your own home poker games. And in this particular time, Google AdWords was like a very new thing. And not a lot of people were buying inventory. And I was able to buy for like 10 cents a click how to win at poker, what are the odds of getting a straight flush, poker strategy, poker odds calculation, what are the odds of, you know, like there's all this long tail of keywords. And I sold this thing for $30 a download on my website. And I, in my sophomore, junior years of Princeton, sold thousands and thousands and thousands of copies of this software at, you know, $30 a pop, having spent, you know, 10 cents a click and like having a 5% conversion rate or something like that. It was like, you know, every single one of these that sold was like $25 of just cash profit to the bottom line. It was absolutely wild. It was transformational. And I just completely fell in love with software. And funny enough, my senior year, I took a mechanical engineering class and built something out of hardware as a class project. The team that I was on invented this thing that was like a two-way valve that would allow you to suck water up through a regular vacuum cleaner. So you didn't need a wet dry vac. And the company Telebrands, the as seen on TV company, actually licensed it and flew us all out to China, and we like built this thing that ended up getting manufactured. I had the video files in my Dropbox somewhere. The guy, it wasn't Billy Mays, but it was Sully. If you've ever seen that guy, he's like Billy Mays 2.0. There's a whole infomercial for it. It was like one of their worst selling products ever. We spent like a year working on this thing. We flew to China. We did this entire development thing, signed all these contracts, negotiated all kinds of stuff. It finally went on sale. Nobody bought it. I didn't make a dime. And all the while, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have sold 8 more copies of the Miraculator, right? And I think it's like this combination of muscle memory and scar tissue that like the muscle memory just kept pulling me in. Software, internet, software, internet. Like the things I was doing in that realm just were getting bigger and more interesting, and my knowledge was getting more specialized and deep. And then the scar tissue was like, hardware is hard. Hardware takes a long time. Traditional, even with the web design business, it was like I built hourly. It's like work another hour to make another dollar. Good business model if I enjoy doing what I'm doing, but being able to go to bed and wake up in the morning and have made $200 by selling a literal like bits and bytes photocopy of the thing was like really, really transformational. So like and it kind of continues from there, right? Like I could go on for 2 hours walking through the history of this, but I always think of this. Have you ever seen the movie Blow? It's a Johnny Depp movie from like 2001 where he plays like a coke dealer.
Yeah.
So it's this long movie, and it's this like biography of this like cocaine kingpin. And at the very end of the movie, he's like going to jail or he's dying or something. I don't remember. And he's there. I think it's with his mom. And his mom's like, "Why'd you do it? Why'd you do it?" And he says, "Mom, you don't understand how good I am at this." And the mom says, "Honey, you would have been good at anything." And I think that that's like a very interesting, like, I think people that end up in these fields where they get super specialized, the only thing they're actually good at is not dying, right? Like not stopping. Because what ends up happening is you, if you're really, really passionate about something and like intellectually curious about it, what happens is you just go deeper, 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 narrower, narrower, narrower. And you find yourself in a spot where like, all right, maybe there's a very finite number of people on the planet who happen to have this particular set of skills. Does that mean it's interesting? No, this stuff I do is so boring. Like I can't even like go to my daughter's preschool and like strike up a conversation with the mom or the dad standing next to me about what I do without talking about data escrow services and like pipeline integrations and stuff. Like it's not glamorous, but it's specific. And I just haven't stopped. And I think that it's got more to do with the luck along the way of like, it just so happened my poker thing was popular and my wet dry vac thing wasn't. But if it had been the opposite, I might be working at a as seen on TV thing right now, talking about how the greatest injection molded plastic inventions of the last 20 years came out of whatever the hell company I'd started in that universe. The luck and randomness factor, I think, like dominates everything else.
I love that. I love that answer so much. And I heard did this like podcast with Mr. Beast, the like YouTube billionaire guy. And it's the same thing. He was just obsessed with YouTube when it first came out, went totally down the rabbit hole, like with a group of other YouTubers figuring out what content performed the best. And he just became the best at YouTube content and virality. And then, ended up having this career. And it certainly resonates with me. As somebody else who has gone down the path of entrepreneurship, gotten the scar tissue and the rewards in different ways, and then built on it. But I gotta back up from that also for a second and understand, like, so I get it, 100%, and I can see that. I have to imagine that when no, I can't have to imagine. I'm sure this is the case. Like when you look to grow outside of your craft, and when you run up against a challenge and you need to like go to someone and get medicine, as I call it, when I just need somebody to like hit me over the face, or give me a cold glass of water and show me what I'm missing or help me think through the thing, like what are your sources? Who's on your board of advisors? Personally, I know Jake Stein. We don't need to stroke his ego at all, right? He's got plenty of that. But I'm joking. But no, just I know Jake's a good resource for you, of course. But like, where do you draw some of your strength from when you run into those challenges, or what helps you get past some of these things? Like, do you do it all yourself? Like, do you go for a run and meditate, or do you go to certain people, or do you watch the same YouTube video of Tony Robbins talking about mastery of state or some shit? Like, what is it that you do that gets you your alignment and gets you past these challenges? Who is it? What is it? Like, what are some of the things that you found as good resources for you to get further along on your journey?
Yeah, I'll answer your question with yet another rambling story, but that I do think kind of informs the answer a little bit, and it is a Jake Stein story. So Jake, again, was my co-founder at RJ Metrics and at Stitch. Jake and I still, to this day, by the way, have a weekly standing 1 hour long like co-coaching session where we just kind of like, tell each other the hardest things going on in our businesses and like really challenge each other, on the different ways to approach those problems. He now is CEO of a company called Common Paper in the contracts as APIs space. Anyway, way back in like the Camden office in the RJ Metrics days, I come to the office one day. It's just me and Jake. And over the weekend, I had read some business book. I don't even remember what it was. It might have been a lean startup. It might have been like Crossing the Chasm, Innovator's Dilemma, one of these things. And I start talking to Jake about this book and how good it was. And I'm like, oh, and they said this thing, and they also said this thing, and it gave me really like this really good idea. And Jake like lets me ramble for a little bit, and there's like a silence in the air, and he just says to me, "What didn't you like about it?" And this is where I get to use my one F word. I was like, fuck you, man. Because it really just completely, I like spent the next 24 hours going from like completely in love with this book to looking at the book through the lens of a skeptic and just realizing how much of it was like self-confirmatory, telling me what I wanted to hear, like random non-actionable bullshit, basically. And I think that's the thing that I was really bad at, I think, throughout college and early in my career and through the early years of RJ Metrics, that I think I credit Jake more than anybody with like kind of helping correct in me, is like when there's something hard going on, it's one thing to have a group of people around you who can challenge you. It's another thing to know which one is going to actually challenge you in the right way and like make you the most uncomfortable. And like the direct answer to your question is like, yeah, there's Jake. I have a CEO coach. I have a board. I have an awesome executive team here. I have my wife, Allie, who is always able to, give me perspective and help me think about things in new ways. My kids challenge me in interesting and different ways. And like, I think anytime I'm having trying to answer a really hard problem or running into an issue, in theory, I could go to any one of those people and find a way to use their perspective as an outlet or a way to help explore, understand that problem. But the question is like, there's always a way that like, if I just want to feel better about something, I can just go to my kids, right? Like go play with them, zoom out, perspective, nothing matters, spend time with the ones you love, and you kind of come away from that. If I go to Jake, it's going to be like cold analytical, like let's hyper rationalize this thing into a extremely methodical, logic driven answer. And there's like everything in between. So the question is, depending on the problem, is this I got to go to my kid's problem, or I got to go to Jake problem, or I got to go to my CEO coach, or take it to my board, or whatever else. And knowing it's less having the people and more being like intellectually honest about which of those people actually knows the answer, even if it's the answer that I'm afraid to hear or that I'm afraid is true. And a good CEO coach can be all of those people at once, because they're also aware enough to kind of play the role that needs to be played to help aid the CEO along. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge network of mentors who, each have their own very particular set of skills that they've gone very deep with and narrow with over the years. And I think enlisting them in the right ways is the challenge and the opportunity.
I love that. I love that answer. I learned this early in my career too, and it aligns with everything you just shared. Just, I think you did it more eloquently, but I learned when you go to someone for advice, this is, I think this is still true, but like, you will get what they would do. You'll get their advice. And so you have to be careful as to who you go to for advice, right? Because you're just going to get what they would have done, right? So, you go to your dad for advice, he's going to tell you what somebody in PR in that industry with that experience would do. It's not necessarily what a CEO would do in that scenario or this or so forth. So it is important to know who you go to for advice for the problem. And I think that's one that has served me really well. And I'm glad to hear, I'm not glad to hear, that's the reaffirming for me to know that that's been something for you. We have a couple questions that got chatted in, and we've got about 5 minutes left. So yeah, let's just drill through these. And Bob, again, thank you for being here. Everyone, thank you for joining and meeting Bob, learning about his career. If you get a chance to see Bob at future Philly events and anywhere in the ecosystem, he's just a fantastic guy to have around and to help level up your game and just I think he levels up our whole entrepreneur community here in Philly. So if I don't get a chance, Bob, thank you again for joining and for participating, being part of my network and my companies. We really do appreciate it. There are 2 quick questions, 3 that are getting chatted in. I don't know if you can see all these, but
I do. Yeah, I've got them up here.
Okay, cool. So yeah, if you want to drill through those real quick for everybody in the next 5 minutes, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem. It's big existential questions, 5 minutes. And hey, before I dive into those, I do, if I can plug one thing, I just signed a book deal with Wiley and have a book coming out in March of next year called Ecosystem-Led Growth. That is a combination. It's kind of like half my entrepreneurship journey story and half it kind of parlays that into the story of Crossbeam and ecosystem-led growth as a category. And then the back half of the book is all playbooks and case studies and kind of concrete examples of how to use ELG techniques out there in the real world from a lot of our customers and investors and other folks. So you will get very tired of hearing me talk about this book on LinkedIn come springtime, but that is probably, if you want to double click on any of these answers, that's the way to do it.
And everyone on here gets a copy. So put in your addresses in the chat.
Get it in there, man. I honestly, whatever it takes, happy to do it.
I appreciate it. All right, 4 minutes, 3 questions. Let's see if we can do a lightning round.
Yeah, one piece of advice I give myself 10 years ago. Oh, this is a really good question. 10 years ago, 2013. God, I think like buy all of the Bitcoin. I think would have been the best possible thing. Yeah, I like a realistic answer there. Like, this is going to be such a cheesy answer, but sometimes you think about high school and it's like that felt like it was 100 years long. Like it like the place that high school might like hold in a lot of people's brains, because at that time, as a percentage of your adult life, it is a very large percentage. And as a percentage of even the like period of your life when you're making memories and like have formative experiences, it's like half your life, right? And in 2013, I was right in the middle of building RJ Metrics, like right in the middle. And I didn't realize it, but I was in like a high school-like experience. Like we ran that business for 8 years. And like proportionally speaking, it was kind of like a high school equivalent, right? It was twice as long, but maybe my life had been twice as long at that point. And like, I can't tell you how much I invoke this RJ Metrics at Crossbeam. It's like the team is going to be so tired of hearing me answer every single question or explain every single decision through the lens of some RJ Metrics story, but it really is. And I think the one thing that really I probably mentioned more than anything else to actually answer this question is this mantra of no one is coming to save you. And I think that's what I would tell myself going back 10 years, just no one is coming to save you. And I think for a long time in that company, I always just had this mindset of like, if we can just land this one next big customer, everything will be all right. If we close this deal, or if we hire this next VP of sales who's going to come in and like fix these problems in our sales organization, everything's going to be amazing. Or like, if we can close this venture capital investment and add this incredible investor to our board, and that brings us credibility and all these insights, like everything's going to be amazing. And that's not how it works. Like at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, when things get good, bad, or ugly, is ultimately up to the person in the CEO's seat to take full ownership and accountability of like the destiny and destination of the thing that's being built, regardless of what other things you're able to assemble around yourself. And I think the minute you start to offload some of that core responsibility of whether it's working or it's not working to any other place, or place your hopes in some future event that is supposed to go solve that for you, you're losing. And that sense of agency, I don't think I had that until I don't even know, but it certainly wasn't there in 2013. It took having that company ultimately not turn out to what we wanted it to be, right? Having it stop growing, having to do layoffs there, having to kind of correct the ship, and thankfully find a really great outcome for it in the midst of all that, but not without losing a lot of hair and a lot of stress and some friends along the way, to kind of come out the other side and realize like that level of ownership. So I think that's, no one's coming to save you, right? I say it almost every day at CrossBeam. No one's coming to save us but us. Positive work-life balance, man, I could spend an hour just on this. Having kids was like fundamentally the solve for this. I did not have a good work-life balance throughout it all. That's my real answer to the question. It wasn't until I had kids and it became, and that happened at the same time as COVID. So it's a really hard way to like disassociate those two from each other. Like they're a package deal for me, kids in the pandemic, which is a weird thing, but it created this wild forcing function where I had to blow up everything that I knew about what it meant to do work. And CrossBeam became a mostly remote company in the midst of that. I started working from home more often, and kind of rebuilt my life around making sure that I was gonna, be able to give as much at home as I did at work. And a lot of that, like, I think it's about being able to know when to delegate, when to trust people. There's a difference between no one's coming to save you and you can't trust anybody. And I think like it has made me a much more shrewd leader in terms of holding people accountable and doing performance management and only allowing exceptional people to be around the table, even when it means hard conversations with good people, who are kind and I want to spend time with. Like we only have so many hours in a day, and realistically I probably worked 80-90 hours a week at RJ Metrics. I think I work 40 to 50 at CrossBeam, and I'm not ashamed to say that, right? I'm not one of these like hustle culture founder types. I get a lot done in those 40 to 50 hours, and I think that's the time I have for it. I know we're over time.
Yeah, we're good. No, thank you, dude. Thank you. Awesome. Really great conversation. Really impressive to hear, like, just in your own words and with your own depth and breadth, like about your journey and some of these different facets of what's driving you and what's getting you along the way. And so really appreciate it again. Stay in touch, stop by, check out the We Hang next time you're in Philly. And
Will do, yeah.
We'll stay in touch, man. It's great to have you. Really appreciate everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody who came. Have a good one.
Guys. All right.